reflective, not just reflective about what everyone else is doing as they read, but about our own reading and our own reading habits and our own reading identities. So this is, a starting off question. Consider the last thing you read. Did you skim it or were you deeply immersed in it? Just for you to kind of think about that, what your own interaction with reading has been lately. And again, my name is Sherine. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey with the teaching of reading, and then I want to pass it on to you, and I would love to hear your own experience with the teaching of reading. So for me, I really have no other place to start than to really start at the beginning over 20 years ago, which really is where it started, where I was originally a journalist. And if you've ever read The Devil Wears Prada or watched that movie, the first one where she's running around all over New York like a crazy person, that was my life, my first year. And by the end of the year, I said, you know what? I don't want to do this. I want to teach high school English language arts. And it really did happen in that way. And I went, and what a time to go into English language arts. So dating myself, this is now Google is starting to push into full force into English language arts classrooms. There's starting to be a lot of debates. This is changing the nature of reading. This is changing the nature of writing. I found that world so exciting, trying to figure out how will now the subject matter change as we're going into this, internet-filled world. I was working in it for a while, and there came to a point when I was working in the high school where I was teaching AP and I was head of department, and I felt very comfortable and secure with myself and what I knew until one day, what happened was that there was someone who came into my class with a fifth grade reading level, and I was teaching a 10th grade class at that time. And I had this very big shock, not a shock that someone like her existed. If I were to be honest with myself, many people had existed before that point, but I kind of just blamed everyone else, the system, the parents, the teachers before me, everything like that. It's like this defensive mode. But I had this moment at that time where I realized I don't know how to help her. Teaching at that elementary level is a different type of teaching than at the high school level. And I realized in that moment that I could sit here and blame everyone else for this problem, but if I don't know how to help her, then I'm also part of the problem. And so, in a very dramatic act, I left that position, certified myself in literacy coaching, and moved to elementary school because I wanted to learn how did reading build? How did they come to me? What are they doing there? What are we doing at the higher levels? And how does that connect? And I'll tell you, I learned so much in that time. It was like my own professional development in a way to really learn about how people come to read and what reading means. And then, because I like to torture myself, after that, I asked the question, well, what if we're not right? We keep saying we do this to prepare people for college and for the world. Well, how do I know they're prepared? We're preparing them. So then I moved all the way to university and I started working with university kids to see what strategies really did help them. What were they struggling with? What were professors doing and what worked and what didn't work? And that's basically my encompassed, journey from K through university. And then after that, now I work mostly with teachers, helping them with different literacy practices. And now I'm going to open it up to you, but how I want to start this off is that in working with teachers and working with a lot of teachers from different subject areas, and I mean even trying to work with math teachers to incorporate reading strategies, science teachers, language arts, everyone. What I sense this overwhelming feeling with people is that there's a big feeling of frustration. There's a big feeling of feeling ill-equipped, that there are students coming to them for a subject, and yet they're being required to teach a reading strategy, and they don't want to teach reading, and why is everything like this? So there's a lot of stress and tension. And I wanted to now, open it up to you and see, or I'm wondering, how do you guys feel about your classrooms and how students are coming to you? Are you feeling stressed? Are you seeing a difference? Please, I would love to hear from you.
First of all, thank you so much for this session, Shireen and Ken. It's lovely to see you all, and Laura's back. Yay! So as you were speaking, Shireen, I was just remembering a few glimpses back when, because I'm currently teaching and I'm a student as well. So in
Mm,
both shows, I've seen that nowadays, or it has been so for a while, I guess now, that reading is not something that would interest,
mm,
I don't know, many people. More and more students I would see in the classroom, when it's reading time, oh no. Or
yeah,
or for them to be asked to read something, in preparation for a class or whatnot. Not everyone is in favor of it. It's becoming a
yeah,
practice where it's like a more of a load than, cognitive load, let's say, than something that would
yeah.
be of uh, of interest. And speaking of interest, I think that that plays a big role, because if what we're reading is not interesting to us, why
Mm,
bother? So
mm.
it's important for us students and as teachers, when it comes to reading in particular, to also consider this aspect. What's in it for me and what's in it for them?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love your description of that. You're absolutely right. It's like a lot of times now students will almost feel like we're burdening them. We're like, what? We have to read all of this? Can't you just tell us? It's like it's almost like we're gatekeeping knowledge, or that's what it might feel like to some people. And I absolutely agree with what you're saying about that we also have to show what's so interesting about it. We have to love that subject area that we're teaching. Sometimes that can be really difficult, right? Because it also took us many years to come to that interest, right? It might be hard to communicate that in just a matter of seconds or minute, at least I feel that struggle sometimes. I would love to hear from someone else as well, and then I'll move on. Oh, I see something in the chat.
Yeah,
Oh, I
there's
see
some points in the
something.
chat that are interesting
Yeah.
from Christina and Rebecca.
Oh, I
I could
love
speak. Oh, sorry, Laura.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Rebecca. Go ahead.
Okay, I can just really quickly speak to my comment. I teach technical communication
that.
to a bunch of engineering students and other students who would much rather not be in my required course. So
Yes.
I find that it's often a struggle to even get them to buy into the value of it, because I feel like they are just so overloaded as it is. And so
Yeah.
to get them to want to read it and to see the value of the struggle, it relates to a lot of what's being said. So sorry to cut you off there,
Yeah.
Laura.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in my experiences like that of Christina. I taught writing, and I soon realized very early on that for a lot of students, they either struggled with reading or they would tell me they flat out hated to read. And so, how on earth you teach writing to students who are struggling with reading? That's when my journey began, and it is very much like Shireen. So, my current favorite book about reading and writing is one for kindergarten teachers because it's awesome. The Talk for
Awesome.
Writing people in the UK, and I'll put a link in the chat. But yeah, this is a long, endless journey, but it's a great one because I love to read, and so trying to find out how I can help students see that value and not be afraid and not hate it is a great challenge. But it's a challenge for sure.
That's great. Thank you, Laura. It lines up with what Christina was saying in the chat as well. I'll echo that, where she wasn't trained to do teaching
Mm.
reading, and that she does a lot of teaching of writing, but less of teaching reading skills. And so they're both so important.
Yeah, it's like I can feel it even, and I could feel I don't want to say like that, I feel the emotion in how you're describing, but it's like this very frustrating feeling, this yearning. That's what I want to say. There's this yearning that we all have. We want our students to engage and to love what we love, and we know that reading can take them to understanding the subject matter in a way that they couldn't in other forms or in other media, right? And you're right, and I'll just wrap it up with this about different subject areas. But even imagine if in the same subject area, it even changes by grade level. So it was my subject area, and yet still I wasn't able to do the teaching of reading for younger. And so, what I'm assuming, if many of you are teaching at the university level, is that since it's kind of like behind, then you're kind of being asked to do the teaching of reading that's done at the secondary level. So it kind of all goes back a little bit. Yeah, so we're all in it together. You're not alone. Don't worry. Okay, so let's continue. Just to briefly say, everyone talks about, oh, their team, their team of researchers. This was my team for this, workshop. And in general, these are the books that have shaped my thinking about this. And I just wanted to share that with you. There's citations at the end, but I highly recommend that people read or resource all of these books if this is something that you're interested in. All of these books cover it. And these will be the main things that we'll be covering today, and hopefully we'll answer it and you'll have a lot of answers. Um, the first most important thing is, why is cultivating a biliterate brain important? So I'm going to talk about what is the biliterate brain. I'm not sure how many people know it, have heard of it. But I'm going to give like a brief mini lesson about it. That's like maybe 5 to 7 minutes, just to make sure we have the same vocabulary and the same understanding. Believe it or not, people have different definitions of even the word literacy. We think it means the same thing to everybody, but it really doesn't. It means different things. So I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing before we then move on. And then we're also going to ask or answer, how do we preserve deep reading habits in digital spaces? So now we're all teaching things in digital spaces. We have Canvas, we're posting readings, disembodied readings. They have to do research, websites, different things. How do we preserve or even get our students to go into deep reading mode when they're in those spaces? So we're going to talk about that. And then we're finally going to talk about, how do we cultivate flexible digital reading dispositions. Now, this might not make that much sense at this moment, but it'll make sense towards the end. We're going to talk about digital spaces and digital reading and the dispositions we have to cultivate within our students and how to do that. So hopefully by the end, my hope for everyone is that I'm going to sprinkle different strategies that are based on research and experience. And then you can choose what's helpful to you, what works. Maybe I'll say something, you're like, yeah, maybe if I kind of change this a bit, it'll work in my class, in my technical writing class, or with my, kindergartners, or whatever it is. Things are always adaptable. So I hope that you come out of this empowered. That's really the word I want you, this feeling of like frustrated, helplessness, I want you to feel less of that by the end, hopefully. Okay, so we'll get started. But before that, does anyone have any questions for me before I get into that mini lesson about the biliterate brain? No? Okay. Usually I always say that when people don't ask questions, it means they either understood everything or they didn't understand anything. So I hope I was clear.
Yep.
Okay, good. All right. So we'll start off. When I write words on my slides, it's really more for me as a reference, as a trigger. You could really just listen along. You're not required or forced to read what I have written, but you can. I will be speaking to the slides. This one is word heavy. So reading is not natural, which is a statement that kind of surprises people. It's like, what do you mean reading is not natural? It's not. Our brains were not built for reading. Okay, so when I say that, I mean like how when we're born, our circuits are built for listening, for seeing, but reading is not one of them. And reading is an invention, which is also a strange thing for people to hear, but that is true. By the way, I want to say the term of the biliterate brain and this research about the reading brain comes from Marianne Wolf's work. She's a neuroscientist and reading brain researcher and expert. So reading was invented 6,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. That's actually not that long ago. It's really not in the course of human history. And in order for our brains to become reading brains, they literally had to rewire and repurpose themselves. So it took the circuits that, for example, that what we use when we look at a face and we recall a face and we hear something and we recognize the sound of it, it had to repurpose those circuits together for us to be able to connect the way a letter looks and the way a word sounds. Like that connection is not natural. One has to build it and work at it to create these circuits of circuits. It's actually an amazing phenomenon that our brains are able to do it, the plasticity in our brains. And when our brains did that 6,000 years ago, it literally changed the course of history. And I'm going to tell you how it did that. A lot of that is based on the research from Walter Ong. So writing speech down, I'm going to say it and then I'm going to explain it. Writing speech down, right? So having it written in one place created this fixity, okay, that didn't exist before that point. And it gave people the cognitive and physical space to sit with text and reflect on logic, language, philosophy, and science. So what does that sentence mean? What am I trying to say? So before letters and words were written down, everything was memorized, and so much cognitive load was put towards memorizing things, right? And we had cultures of fables and parables, poetry, a lot of effort to hold on to it. Once we started to write things down, there started to be less of a cognitive load on the brain to have to memorize things, which left more space and more room to think about other things. Okay, so now when the words, we're not putting all of our energy on holding on to it and memorizing it, and now it's in front of us. Now we have more space to actually look at the words and the physical space, so we don't have to worry about holding on to it. It's in one place. Now we could sit there and think about language and logic, mathematics, philosophy, science. Our cultural, some say cultural revolution just spurred after this point. That really what ignited all of this was the invention of reading, as interesting as that is. And so when I talk about deep reading, okay, and again, this is just a few slides and then it's not going to be me talking as much. When I talk about deep reading, when I say I want us to engage in reading and how people have different definitions, what I'm describing is this right here. What is deep reading? It's the slow, immersive engagement with text that allows comprehension to blossom into empathy, critical thought, and original insight. So when we're deep reading and we're sitting there, we get almost transported into this other place where we're allowed to enter into other people's perspectives. We're allowed to feel what they're feeling. We're allowed to compare what was said before, what is said after, the logic, the argument. We are allowed that space to really think about what we feel and think about it in response. So this is when we say reading, because we're reading all the time, right? We're reading text messages, we're reading headlines, but that's not the deep reading that we want to develop in our students and that we're going to be learning about. So deep reading, have you guys engaged in deep reading? Actually, I'm going to ask you that. I'm going to give you all that time, I promise. I just want to get this part over. So then eventually reading moved on to screens. This was great. Yay! Reading started to be on digital screens, computers, websites, everything. We got really excited. We were like, this is wonderful. Now everyone has access to reading. But then we started to realize, but it doesn't really feel the same like print reading. Then we have Nicholas Carr, which was one of the first people to really study the digital reading brain. And he had such a brilliant metaphor about the difference between digital reading on the brain and print reading. And what he said was, once I was a scuba diver in a sea of words, and now I zip along the surface like a guy on a jet ski. So it's kind of like print reading makes you go all the way deep like a scuba diver. But your distance is not as far. You might not be able to know as much, but you know deeper. Whereas when you're reading digitally, you might be able to know more, but it's surface level. And so this is kind of like that comparison that we're all feeling, the skimming, the scanning. And because our brains are plastic, and because most of our reading now is starting to be digital, the reading that we used to have, that we built, those circuits, in alphabetic text, we could lose that if we're not careful. And so that's where the danger lies, okay? And we're going to be talking about how can we preserve it and make sure that doesn't go away. So what is the biliterate brain? This is the last slide of this. So what is the goal of the biliterate brain? We want to make sure that we're preserving deep reading that allows us to slow down and think critically. As we're looking at this fast-paced information that's coming in front of us. The scanning that we do, that's digital, this is actually a survival skill, which is a really interesting way to phrase it, but that is what it is. It's the way we cope with vast amounts of information, and it's the way we're able to read and understand more than just read, it's the way we're able to just handle it. We're being bombarded. And so both have to be done at the same time in order for us to truly understand all of the messages that are coming at us and be able to still have empathy and critical thinking and original insight as this flood of information is coming. Okay, so now I'm done with that. And I hope that that information was helpful for you. What I want right now is I'm going to put out a Padlet. And Ken, would you be able to put that link for me? If everyone can go to this Padlet, and I'm going to exit out. Let's see if I could do this. Put the link. If everyone can go to this Padlet, and the instructions are there. There we go. Okay. The instructions are there. What I would like for everyone to do, I just gave you a whole lot of information and there was a whole lot of me talking. Now I would like for you to have this opportunity. I have some sentence starters here for you. But what I want you to do is really take a post-it from the side of the Padlet and then write down in all everything I said, something that stood out to you, something it reminded you of. Maybe there was a word that you liked, or maybe it reminded you of something that you read. Maybe it's making you think of a certain student in your class. Maybe it's making you wonder something, anything. The what do they call it? It's all the world is your oyster. You could write whatever. And here are some sentence starters if you would like. So we're gonna all go onto the Padlet. So I want to see what you guys are writing there. If you could get started. My bar isn't moving. I'm sorry. Hold on. I hope you guys are doing that as I'm figuring this out. Okay, there we go. Yay. Okay, now I'm seeing some of what you guys are writing. Does it show up for you, Ken? Is it showing up or everyone? What's showing up on the screen now? The
Yeah,
Padlet, right?
it's showing up
Okay,
really well.
perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, it looks really cool when it's like in real time.
I love this. I love this with my class as well, to be able to see them all
Mhm.
working. The ones that don't know what to do can pay attention to what others are doing. It's
Yes.
such a help with my students.
And as everyone is writing, I would love for everyone to read one another's posts. Mm. Oh, I didn't realize we can put an emoji on someone else's post. Is
Yeah,
that
I
what
just
someone
did that.
did?
I
I
just
love
did
that.
that.
I didn't realize you can do that. What a cool feature.
I was thinking of replying, but I thought that worked.
Yeah, that does. I love that. I'm really loving enjoying these posts. And isn't it different to see it on a on like a post-it versus like a post on like Canvas, even though they're both called a post. There's something
Hmm.
about a post-it. Feels very intimate to me. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up in a minute. In this meantime, in this minute, what I would like is like, if you haven't already, I would like you to be reading other people's posts, and I would like it if I could get one or two people, maybe two people, to comment on a post that's not theirs. Maybe someone wrote something that you agreed with, or that made you think of something, or is resonating with you.
I'll talk about someone saying that they're curious about the intentional switching. I know I'm really
Mhm.
curious about that too, just because I think there's so much negativity put out there nowadays about what's happening. And
Yeah,
I'm so curious about the brain. I'm someone who has also gone through the process of recovery, and I know for a fact that brains can be rewired. And so I'm just
yeah,
so curious about this and about how this could be a really interesting way for us to reach out to students in a way that empowers them instead of making them feel
yeah.
like they're lesser than. So I'm really curious about that.
I feel the same way. I have that same sentiment. And maybe that's the sentiment that makes someone even interested in this topic, right? This this non-shaming place. Like, let's see, the beauties and everything, not in a blind, naive way, but like let's, it's I get what you're saying and I agree. And I still have that curiosity and I love that you're also curious. If we could have one more person.
Uh,
Oh, I love
I-
these
I'll
comments.
jump in. I
Yeah.
love the Nicholas Carr thing about the jet ski and the versus the deep breathing. And let's face it, jet skis are cool, right? So,
That's
like what Rebecca was saying, that it's all good. I mean, it is amazing to have the opportunity, the ability, the option to skim. Sometimes that is the appropriate
Yeah,
response, right? I don't want to
yeah.
deep read every text that I get. And so
No.
I also want to say I love this idea of switching and teaching
Mhm.
the switching as an option. And just to chime in with a quick historical thing, we're so lucky that we have the option to skim, right? Because the way writing used to happen was all capital letters and there were no spaces between words. You could not skim. It was physically impossible to skim. You had to read everything out loud. And I love to read out loud. And I think that's a great thing to do. But the fact that we have an option to do these two different modes and other modes too, we're lucky. It's good. So no shaming.
Yeah.
I think it's very positive.
What great comes. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I definitely I agree with everything you're saying. I love it. But especially to speak to the point where you're saying sometimes skimming is appropriate. It's definitely appropriate, especially when we're working. That was the biggest takeaway I got in working with the university students, the ones who had so much reading and they're just drowning, really drowning, not because they didn't care, not even because they didn't know how to read, they didn't know how to switch to that type of reading. So it really is this ability to know which strategies are being called upon. So yeah, I'm all for skimming and for digital reading if it's what's appropriate in that moment. Okay, so let's move on because I feel like we can do these wonderful comments all day. I will go back and I have a few activities. I'm one of these people, I want you to feel the reading experience we talk about, not just talking about. So we're gonna transition into our first reading activity. Let me just see. I'm gonna share this again. Wait, where am I sharing from it? Oh no, my bar. Ken, we keep talking about the bar.
That's
Oh, there
okay.
it is. Hold on. And I apologize. So obviously this is not, I'm not good at that type of digital navigation, which is the Zoom. Is it showing up for you guys? My slides?
That we're seeing the MyFest presentation, and
You're
I think
seeing
we're
the
going to switch to
presentation.
slideshow. Yep, good go.
Yes?
Yep,
Okay,
perfect.
good. So right now, the main question that we're going to be answering, and we're going to do two reading activities, like activities, just to get us, really thinking about what our students are experiencing. That is the ultimate empathetic goal that I want you to feel. What are they experiencing when we are giving them these readings? So I also, one, I want us to think about what are they experiencing, and two, I want us to think about what can we as teachers do? Like what's in our hands realistically, instead of just being very upset about the state of reading, which is something upsetting. But what is actually in our hands that we can actually make this a little better? So I have a doc that hopefully it's the one that I labeled house activity. Um, Everyone is going to click on that doc. Just hold on first, don't click on it yet. You're going to open up the doc and you're going to wait for my instructions. You're going to be ready to underline and highlight different things that I instruct you to do. And individuals using screen readers can just use comments. You don't have to worry about the highlighting. The point is really just to identify what's happening. Okay, so click on the house activity. Okay. And I'm going to give you a few minutes. And the first set of instructions, you're going to read it. It's like what, 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. You're going to read the house and you're going to highlight what you think is important in yellow.
We can only view it, we can't edit it.
Oh
I was
no.
looking for
Okay. I'm so sorry. Thank you for telling me that. Thank you. Hold on. Why is this not coming out? Exiting the share. Stop share. Here we go. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, thanks. I was just trying to figure it out if I was missing something.
And then I just remembered why I did it as actually, if I actually, I take it back. I take it back. Now I remember why I did it, because otherwise you're all going to be doing the same thing. If you could just make a copy of it. Are you able to do
Excellent.
that?
Good idea. Yep.
Yeah. That was why. I was like, why did I do that? It's because then you're all going to be on the same doc. So copy it and then do your work on it.
Actually, I don't have option to make. Oh, hold on. I might
Is
need
it
to
allowing you to
make
copy?
1 second. Yeah, it's okay. I just have
It's
to
under
log in.
file.
Yeah, I had it in two windows. One was anonymous. Good.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Ken, are you seeing my slide? I have to do the slideshow, but are you seeing it or no?
Second. No.
Sorry.
No, we're not
Okay.
seeing. Go ahead and represent.
Okay.
Thanks. I'm on a laptop. I'm used to being on a computer with multiple screens, and I'm on a laptop today.
No,
Navigating is
it's
more
me that I'm
interesting.
making you guys go all over the place. Okay.
No,
I'll
you're
be
good. Now we
quiet
can
now.
see house activity.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'll be quiet now. Go ahead, read. Take your time. I'll wrap it up and maybe I'll give you another like minute and a half. Minute. If you're done, you could also let me know with like a thumbs up or something.
Perfect. I knew Laura was finished.
Okay. Remember to do your, just because I don't know when you guys started, because I kept switching stuff. Okay. Yes? Thumbs up? Can I see a thumbs up? Yeah. Okay. Now you're going to read that piece again. And with a red highlighter, you're going to mark the places in the text that a robber or a thief would find important.
Mm.
Okay. We're going to move on. Yeah. Okay. Now you're going to read the piece one last time. And now you're going to underline what a prospective home buyer might find important. Okay, if you could start wrapping that up. That was the last one. The colors don't necessarily matter as much. The point is to know the difference. Okay. So now we're going to go into our first breakout room. Okay. Ken, if you can put, I would say 3 people, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. What do you think, Ken? What's your
That
opinion?
sounds about right. Noreen's going
That
to
sounds
set up the
about,
breakout rooms at Bogan.
yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So 3 people, 6 minutes. Let me just tell you as we're doing that, what we're reflecting on and what you're going to be talking about. So I want you to reflect. What did you notice about the 3 different readings? Which was the most difficult reading? And why do you think that is? And while the breakout rooms are being made, if you can jot that down just to kind of remember what you might want to say to your group. And that's going to be your conversation. What did you notice about these 3 different readings? What was difficult? What was easy? And then why? And then we're going to come back and talk about it.
So how many minutes?
6 minutes?
About 6 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Okay, so 5 minutes with a 60-second countdown.
And I put the instruction from the chat here.
Thank you.
I
Oh,
also
wait.
included,
It included me, but I'm staying here.
Yeah,
yeah,
you
it's
can
okay.
stay.
I'll put
No
not
worries,
now.
you can
Does
stay.
that throw away? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Or anyone
I
can stay if
included
they want to
the
stay in the main
co-hosts
room.
in case
Okay.
they want to join.
Yeah, I
Yes.
always love to see who's in it now.
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. I'm glad everyone is coming back. I hope you all had very fruitful conversations. And I'm so curious to know, what did you notice about the 3 readings?
Something
Well, I
in.
talked too much, but I'll chime in. We had so much fun. We started talking about how none of us actually visualize the house. Like we're reading all these words that are giving us all these visual clues, but we're not building a house in our brains. But we do pay attention to different things as readers. And it made us so
Yeah.
curious who maybe does visualize the house. And then we started obsessing about the line breaks and the width of lines and how it's all one big block, even though it's really got a shape based on the
Mm-hmm.
meaning and the pauses and the punctuation, but that the presentation in full justified text sort of obscures that. Anyway, we were just going on.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Did
Laura.
any of you feel like one reading was more difficult than the other readings?
Heather and I talked about
Heather's
that
nodding.
quite a
Mhm.
bit. And something
Yeah.
else that we talked about that was interesting is that how in some ways it was frustrating to know what was important. And then it got us really thinking about how, as educators, the way we set up and frame readings for our students can really
Mhm.
influence our students. And we hadn't really
Yes.
thought
Mhm.
about that because
Uh,
it's just one of these, points of privilege that we don't often think about is how we frame it for our students. And so that was
yeah.
really interesting to think
Yeah.
about.
So when that first question, when it was just highlight what you think is important, what happened during that first reading for you guys? I think, Ken, you said that you even scanned the first
I
sentence or
skipped
you
that first
skipped.
line. I
Yeah.
didn't know they were playing hooky. And then in the second reading, I
Mhm.
got that first line. I skipped it completely.
Yeah. Yeah. What else did you guys do? That definitely skipping. What did you feel like a struggle of not know thinking everything is important, which is one way that people go. Maybe it's all, and then you become one of those people like in your book that highlight everything, or you highlight nothing because you feel like you're stuck. Yes,
I agree
Christina.
with Laura too.
Yeah, I was reading all through it and I'm like, I don't know what's supposed to
Yeah.
be important. And then I thought, okay, maybe the last line I feel is important because everything was like money, jewels, crystal, blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, oh, there's a leak in the ceiling. The old roof had finally rotted. And I was like, that feels different. Maybe that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
I don't know. Right? Like, yeah, that first one was tough.
That first
And I
one.
think kind of needed a first reading to be able to
Mhm.
kind of get the context. And then now I can focus on what's important. I couldn't focus on that from the start of the reading.
So we have multiple readings to help when we're not given that guidance in the beginning, we don't really know what is important. As teachers, we can take for granted that because we know a reading that we're assigning, it's obvious to us what a purpose is or what we want them to look for or see. And then when they don't, we're so frustrated that they don't.
But we don't want
But
to bias them, but we do.
we don't want to bias them, but it doesn't have, it could be a question.
Right.
Right. So that's kind of like what I want to talk to you about with before we get to this picture about what can we do? And I actually love this tension that we're bringing up about giving them some kind of direction and purpose without biasing them, because these are very, very true points, things that we have to consider as teachers. So something now, this activity, this was research that was done in the 70s that really made a difference in the teaching of reading and made people see that even though we could all share the same text, that we're all kind of entering it and could be coming away with different purposes. And if a purpose is not outlined from the beginning, that the reader may struggle then. So now we're in a time where we give our students readings. If our classes are on Canvas, for example, a lot of our readings, I call them disembodied text. That's how I think of it.
Mhm.
Just these PDFs, kind of sprinkled. Sometimes there's no title. Sometimes we don't know what book it came from. We don't know how long it is. We don't have that fixity of a book to know, okay, I have to like kind of focus for 3 pages worth, 5 pages worth. I don't know how it relates to other readings in the class. So there are all these things that are kind of floating that the reading brain, when we're approaching our assignment, like we kind of look at it and we can get overwhelmed before we even start reading. So that being said, what are some things, thinking about your classes, what you assign, how your assignments are given to your students, what are some things that you think that could be helpful for
for
students.
everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to have a little bit more purpose, to have a little more fixity. That word really is the word fixity, groundedness. How can we ground this reading? What can we frame? How can we help our students? Yeah, so please go ahead, call out.
I noticed, and it made me appreciate a little bit more
Mhm.
guiding them of, okay, this reading will take this much time or this, because I remember being in university back in, well, the 1980s,
Mhm.
and you kind of like measure your book of, okay, I
Yeah,
got to read these
yeah.
2 chapters and I
You
can
knew how
physically
long is
grab it.
left, right? Until the chapter
But
test.
I
Yeah,
didn't
they're
appreciate before that kind of
gonna.
how many minutes this reading is guidance is important to students.
Mm-hmm. You're saying you do feel like it could be important, or it's
I
not?
no, I think I have a better appreciation for it just
Yeah.
with this exercise.
I've heard some people, I don't know how to do this, like a tech thing. If you know, if you can figure out how to do it, I think it would be helpful. There are some people who create like a map, like with each reading
Mhm.
to show that it's this many
How they're
pages and that there's
connected
going to
and
be, yeah, breaks at certain points. Like you're going to get to have a break here, like a reflection break. So, do you know how to do that, Ken? I know you're the computing person.
no, no, but it sounds awesome.
Yeah, it would be really, really helpful. Any other things? I'm not always looking at the comments, but I
No,
see
I'm
that
trying
it's
to keep
very
on top of them.
active.
There's lots of
Yeah, give them an idea of what they should be paying attention to. Yeah, and maybe we could do that with an essential question, a theme for that week, objectives for that week. Maybe it could
Mhm.
all be on the syllabus. Honestly, in working with students at the university, when I would be working with them on their readings, sometimes just helping them figure out, like I said, the context of that reading. What is it in relation to the theme of that week? What is the professor's purpose of the whole course? And just having
Yeah.
them ground themselves in that so they can just focus really made their read a lot clearer. I'm not telling them what to read. I'm just kind of like maybe taking away the clutter. Maybe that's a better way to say it. Um, I love using the TQE method to set up readings. Can you tell us about that, Rebecca?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, I often teach a bunch of students who are not always the most excited to be in my class because it is a required class in a technical college
Mm-hmm.
and it's a
Mm-hmm.
humanities-based class. And so what I often do is this was introduced by the Cult of Pedagogy, Jennifer Gonzalez, as Laura mentions in the chat. Um, and what it is TQE stands for thoughts, questions, epiphanies. And what I often will do is I will set up an editable Google slide before each class with along with the reading, and I'll invite students to contribute to that Google slide. And then either as a way to as a pre-assessment or a post-assessment, I'll visit that slide and I will use that to guide often some of the discussion. And what I like about that is it kind of invites students who aren't always as comfortable to contribute in class so they can do it outside of
Yeah.
class. But it also
They're doing
really,
it all. I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
yeah,
They're doing it all together, like a social
right.
education. I love that. I
Yeah,
love
on a Google slide.
on
Yeah.
a
And what's
Google
really cool is
slide.
that it becomes like an artifact for the class
Mm-hmm.
too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what I find is like it's engaging enough that it gives students a framework to go into the text, but it's
Yeah.
not so prescriptive that I'm telling them what to look for. But what's
Yeah.
wild is like they will often find things that I would never have considered, and it just really kind of guides that discussion.
Yeah.
And also tells I also tell students like I'm expecting you to do this. And so like I sometimes
Mhm.
I'll either will like give the first 5 minutes of class to have them do a quick little think, pair, share activity where I'm like, if you didn't read it, you're gonna have to skim it real quick, right?
Yeah.
Or I will use it afterwards. But it's just kind of a neat, flexible activity. And I left the link in the chat, so I can't take credit for it, but I find it's a really good activity to get students engaged. And
I
now
wrote
that I'm
this down.
learning,
I feel I'm going to
yeah.
use it. Thank you for that. Thank you
Hmm.
for that. No, I think that's great. Anything that first that's like modeling exactly, and we're kind of transitioning to that, the types of like questions and ideas that go through a person's mind as they're reading, and then also to make it social. We're so disconnected, right? And nowadays that anything that can bring kind of social commentary together or a social connection is amazing. Thank you. All right, we're going to transition. This is my transitioning picture. I just love when I saw this picture, and this is the idea that I want us to transition to. We're going to be talking about this idea now about the deep reading, right? I mentioned the deep reading. First, we talked about kind of helping declutter the brain, giving a purpose for reading. Now we're going to talk about what is this deep reading? How do we get students to maybe engage in that? And this, this picture just reminded me of that. He looked very engaged, in my opinion. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you, I'm not going to spend too much time on this activity. This we're going to be doing together. And then after this activity, we're going to be moving on to digital reading ideas. Okay, what do we do in those spaces? So, right now, I want you to follow my instructions. I want you to read this quote when I ask you to, and I want you to just read it one time. So please do that.
Can you read it out loud or I
Yeah.
can just
No, the purpose is that I don't want to read it out loud. But I
But
love
we will
I,
for
I'm
accessibility
gonna tell
after.
you, say that again.
But we will for
Oh,
accessibility after.
oh, who was that asked that? Was that Yeser?
Yeah. Well,
no,
Noreen was, but for
I
Yasser
did.
especially.
I'm
Yes,
sorry,
or
I'm sorry.
anyone.
Okay, I will read it out loud. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
that's the point.
sure, sure. It wouldn't for such a spectator have been altogether insupposable that each so finely brown and so sharply spare, each confessing so to dense of surface and aids to sight, to a disproportionate nose, and a head delicately or grossly grizzled, they might have been brother and sister. Now, I
Yeah.
want you to raise your hand if you feel like you understood that and you understood it so well that you could even retell what it said in your own words.
No,
Is there
no,
anyone?
it looks like it's gone through Google Translate 4 times.
Does anyone feel that? No, right?
Oh man.
Okay, that's exactly the point. So this is okay, this is a quote by Henry James. This was written in 1908, okay? And what happened, what I want to know is when you were reading it and you were sensing, this is a very complicated sentence. And so that was, I'm sorry, why I said I won't read it is only
Yeah.
because I wanted you to embrace the difficulty of it. That was the
And
point.
even the intonations you use changes. Yeah.
Yes, this is the sentence itself. It's not because the concept is difficult. It's because the way the sentence itself is written, it actually doesn't get to the point of the sentence till the very end, the very last part. Everything in between is just like a modifier or description that kind of adds on. Okay. Now, what I want to ask you about is when you started to feel like it was difficult, what did you start to do?
Um, Replace and change words in my head to try to make a meaning of
Okay. So you were replacing and changing. That's very good. Was anyone trying to kind of skip ahead?
it. Christina going to the end like the other reading.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
I don't
going to
know.
the
I was
end.
like,
Yeah,
maybe if I just keep reading,
exactly.
I'll finally figure it out. So yeah, I was skipping ahead.
Skipping ahead, skipping over a few words, trying to see maybe it'll come, right? There is this very real thing that's happening with us now. Sorry, I just need some water. There's this very real phenomenon that's happening with us now. Remember how I'm talking about the circuitry, and when we rely too much on one mode of reading, we start to lose the reading brain circuits. Okay, so we
Mhm.
used to have something before digital reading became so much more dominant. We used to have what was called cognitive patience. Okay, and this meant that we could sit with something or sit with a sentence that we didn't understand and just try to just sit with it and then see. And maybe we're kind of quiet. Maybe we reread it again. We try again. But the point is that we didn't just try to skip over the uncomfortable part. We sat with it. And right
Mm.
now, what's happening is that we're struggling to do that as as a reading society. Now it's like documented. I forgot how much, but now sentences on average are an eighth shorter than they used to be because people cannot prolong it as long. Now, a lot of times people say stuff like this in our attention span, and then they get like a lot of, scared and hysterical. I'm not trying to like oversimplify it, but I want to remind people that our brains are plastic. So nothing is gone forever. So if we do lose something, we can actively do things to bring it back. Okay, we can work that muscle back. And that's the goal of what I want to talk about with this really quick. I'll wrap it up soon. But what we want to do in our classes is, like we're saying, we're seeing our students, they're reading, and maybe to us, we're giving them readings, but we got so used to those readings and we know them so well, we're not realizing how difficult it is, how
Mhm.
much they might be struggling with the complexity of a sentence, especially if it was written before or many years ago. And so a lot of times when we ask students to annotate, we ask them to annotate things that they understand. What did you observe? What do you know? What can you restate? What's the main idea? What can you summarize? And those are great. But we also have to encourage them to annotate points of confusion. We have to encourage them to spot out what are you confused with. So and I'm going to tell you about an activity that you can use. And that third doc that I have is kind of like a gift to you. Like we're not going to go over it, but it's just an activity that you could use in your own classes if you want. So if you could share it, Ken. Basically, it's just an activity of how to get our students used to that uncomfortable feeling of not understanding something. How can we get them to have cognitive patience? How can we get them to recognize that not understanding a sentence is not the end of the world? And if they just sit with it a little longer without rushing to Google for an answer, rushing to AI for a summary, that they potentially could unpack it on their own. So that activity shows that. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but that is the goal of having you read this really complicated sentence and putting you through all that discomfort was for you to acknowledge the discomfort and for you to recognize what happens to all of us when we're feeling uncomfortable. Does anyone have any questions about that or a comment or it made you think about something? It actually made me think of the TQE that Rebecca even said. Just that idea, the questions, social opportunities for everyone to identify their questions and to solve it together. But I wanted to leave it to you guys. Did it make you think of anything?
Think there's such a rush in today's world, and I like this idea of just slowing down and like
Hmm.
just and being intentional about that. And
Yeah.
in the past, I'm going to change the way I teach because oftentimes there's this one sentence that I always read students, and it's this definition of the rhetorical situation by Lloyd F.
Mhm.
Bitzer. And it's a terrible sentence because it's like so long and wordy, and I always read it as a point to students, but I'm going to change how I teach it because like I've always kind of thrown that sentence out as a way of like, you don't have to be so wordy and dense to get your message out. But I think I like this idea of switching and like learning that it's okay sometimes to have these hard things and to sit with it and stay with it. So I think
Yeah.
you've really kind of changed the way I'm going to teach, and I appreciate how
I'm
you've
so
made me more
glad.
curious.
Yeah, I'm so glad. The cognitive patience comes from Marianne Wolf. I didn't think of that, but I agree with you, Rebecca, that it really transformed the way I taught as well. Like really not always rushing my students to get to the answer, which I think makes us feel good as teachers when they know an answer. There's a lot of like self-reflection on like when students are confused. How do I feel about myself as a teacher when they're confused? Is it my fault? Will I know how to address it? Right? So it's a very uncomfortable feeling. So we also have to be comfortable with them being uncomfortable, right? So there's like a lot happening at the same time. Okay, so Ken shared that. And so it's a activity that you can, yeah, use. You can obviously change it up as you want in whatever way. Okay, so now we're going to talk about dispositions and digital spaces. I just wanted to ask first, how many of you are familiar with lateral reading and SIFT? If you could just like call out, is that something that you're aware of or not aware of? Does that mean not aware of?
My thumbs up was aware. I've sat
You
and
have a
talked with
thumbs up? Oh,
Michael.
it didn't show up for me a thumbs up. Okay, I can't, I guess I'm not seeing. I see, okay,
I'm
I've
getting a
heard of
bunch of thumbs up coming across the
not
screen.
aware.
It's
Okay.
like
It's
scrolling stuff.
yeah, it's just a matter of I don't want to take up, I don't want to repeat something if you already know it. I'll just spend a few minutes talking about it because then I want to talk more about the disposition. But this is really important for you to write it down. There are many sources that teach how to do this. So digital reading now, what they're finding now with digital reading, when we're reading websites, when we're getting information from our vast information ecosystem from websites or even from social media, which a large percentage of people now are getting their news from social media, they're finding that when we read in traditional ways, okay, in the ways in which we were taught to read print text, print alphabetic text, which means that we read vertically and very close word by word. They realize that when we apply that strategy to digital spaces, this, how can I say it in a simple way? You know how when they say digital spaces, when we're in it and we're reading, we start losing our attention and we get lost and we skim and scan, and all of that is true. But now that we understand that space more, we understand that that also happens, especially happens because we're applying print strategies to a digital space. Whereas print reading strategies are different from digital reading strategies. And so now there is starting to be a push and a movement to teaching both as different. And this is what we're talking about, the biliterate brain now, right? That these strategies that we learn in this context are not helpful in the digital space. For example, in a digital space, there might be hyperlinks all over the place. If I were to follow the print strategy approach of looking at every word and analyzing every word as I go downward, then when I'm in a digital space, and I have these hyperlinks, I'm going to go into every hyperlink and then go into another hyperlink, and it becomes like a rabbit hole, right? So they're finding people get lost with information. They don't know how to navigate it. They don't know how to evaluate which information is more important. Should I hold off on this link? Is this not important? Is it important, right? So there are all these metacognitive questions that occur differently in a digital space than in a print space. So one of these main approaches is lateral reading that they're saying needs to be done in digital spaces. I encourage you on your own to look up lateral reading. This is an acronym that was created by Mike Caulfield, and it was one of the books that I brought up earlier called Verified. To get the whole main point of it is to help students verify the credibility of sources. So we know when we originally learned how to verify the credibility of source, rhetorical analysis, and all that, that same approach doesn't always work in the digital space. We have to do it a different way in order to evaluate the credibility. And SIFT is that acronym. And again, this is a lot of information. I wasn't sure how many people would know this or not, so I'm sorry for this part if you feel I'm throwing it at you. I encourage you to read more about it. So SIFT is saying, in order to evaluate a source on a website, okay? Because now if someone is doing a research project in your class, they could go on a website. The website looks so credible. It looks amazing. The author looks like he has a lot of credentials, and you wouldn't know if that website is fabricated, whether it's misinformation, disinformation. So we have to give students a strategy to kind of figure that out. SIFT is one of those approaches. We teach students stop. We then, after stopping, they investigate the source. Then they find better coverage. So they look to see if, for example, actually, I had a picture of this. I had a picture. It might be better, a visual. I got thrown off a little. I'm sorry, because I wanted to spend more time talking about SIFT. And maybe I'll shift course, and that's okay. So for example, say you had an article on see this part in the middle. Say you had a news heading that said, students find rainbows made of fruit juice. okay, which is clearly misinformation, okay? If I used a typical print strategy to just read all the way down, I might not know that that's a fake title. There's nothing in the article itself that shows me that it's fake. The language is really good, the vocabulary is very good, the organization seems credible. So the only way for me to actually verify that source is if I go laterally, which means if I open up another tab and actually investigate. I want to know if you have any questions about this, because like I said, I feel like I'm rambling at this point and I don't want to lose you. Yes,
That's
yes, and you
good.
raised your hand. Yes.
Go,
I don't
Laura.
know if you believe in that idea. I've heard a few. I wouldn't say a few years because I cannot really deem that appropriate. But there was a crash course about lateral reading on this YouTube channel, like Crash Course Heroes, I believe.
Yeah.
He said that Wikipedia could serve as a good lateral reading
Mm-hmm.
kind of site. I don't know what you think about that,
What
especially
I feel
nowadays
about
in
that. Yeah.
yeah, especially in the age of AI, where nowadays I think Wikipedia or even written with AI
Yeah.
generated stuff. I
Yeah.
don't believe in that, but I'm curious to hear
To hear mine.
about that. Yeah.
Yes, that I've grappled with that same question. I've heard that as well. And I even looked into it more because for me, with my students, I always told them Wikipedia is not a reliable source and you shouldn't look into it. And then I had heard as well that even looking it up on Wikipedia might be a good way to understand the credibility. I think what I've come to terms with, or what I had, this is how I understand it, is that Wikipedia, it does go through a verification process more so than what I thought. It's not like anyone can just really go on and change it, or else a lot worse things would be said on there. So there is somewhat of a verification process. I still wouldn't use it as my ultimate verification, but I might use it as like my springboard to figure out which other direction I'm gonna go. So it might tell me it's an extremist organization or it's something, and it might make me question or it might make me look into other terms or other ideas. So I don't look at it as the ultimate source, but I look at it as something that can direct me to a more credible source. Do you agree? Would you agree with that or do you disagree? And it's okay if you disagree. I don't know
Laura
if you're
was going to say
speaking right
something.
now.
Go ahead. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
I was just going to jump in and say Mike has been at this for a long time, and he's also grappling with the whole AI thing. And Ken and I were both sharing links here in the chat because the AI question really does change everything, and to my mind makes
Yeah.
Wikipedia all the more important because they do have a lot of things in place that are still working. Who knows how long they will work to fend off a lot of the AI crap, and Mike has a lot to say about that too. So for people who are interested in this, and if this is relevant to the kinds of reading your students do or the work they do in class, Mike Caulfield is an awesome person to follow. He's got a Substack. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Appreciate his information so much. This whole world of lateral reading, and it's constantly evolving as well, as like you're saying, with AI, as our information ecosystem keeps changing, the way in which we read this information and come to know information will also change. Sometimes we think of literacy as static, that literacy has been the same from the beginning until now. No, every time there's a new technology, literacy changes. The way we read change, the way we write changes. And right now we're in one of those as well. Yeah, so okay. But there was a point that I wanted to make about the disposition. Okay, let me try and say it. I didn't want to necessarily take so much time talking about SIFT, but I'm glad I did if it kind of maybe hopefully made everyone on the same level of knowing what I mean, that SIFT is an approach of lateral reading, which is a different type of digital reading. I want to give you another example of why print strategies don't always work in digital spaces, okay? Because a lot of times people will say, we can just never read something on, or how would they say it? People who are very against reading in digital spaces. They'll say the problem is the digital space. If we just continue to cultivate the print reading brain part of us, then we'll be able to navigate the digital really well. And I'm in complete disagreement about that. I feel they're different things. They can complement each other, they could support each other, but they're different. And here's what I'm going to explain about the nature of reading. So when someone is reading, right, there are kind of these three parts of themselves that they're bringing to the text, okay? Well, the first part, I labeled it as, I made these dinky images with Gemini, by the way. Like it's very, I just wanted you to be looking at something. We can call it cognitive, or we can call it, I'll call it cognitive right now. When someone learns to read, they're really kind of understanding the rules of that form. They're understanding, for example, what the alphabet is, how to decode it, what a sentence is. If they're reading a digital space, or if they're reading a picture, they might understand what angles are and what colors mean, or all these things. There's the form of the reading. Then there's the metacognitive and the disposition, okay? The metacognitive part is that part of us that asks questions and interacts with the text as we are reading it. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, when we're reading print text, you might have, if you're a skilled reader, then you have a very interactive voice. A weak reader doesn't have an interactive voice. And so when I've worked with students to try to improve their reading, I've tried to work on their internal interacting voice. That means they're looking at a text, they're asking questions, they're connecting it to themselves and the world and to other texts and so forth. But those questions in a digital space doesn't always transfer. In a digital space, different questions are asked about the verifying where the website came from and whether they should be going into hyperlinks and what background knowledge they need to know and so forth. The final thing is disposition, okay? And this was the part that I felt most excited to talk to you about because I just feel the idea of a reading disposition to be so profound. With a reading disposition, when we're taught to read, a lot of times when we're in classrooms, we're taught to read historically with a very critical eye, to be critical of the text. Then in the 20th century, when globalization started to happen and we started to be exposed to even more text, we had some really great insight, especially by Peter Elbow, that in order for us to really understand another person's perspective, in order for us to really gain empathy when we're reading about other people's experience, we should enter the text with like a believing stance. We should believe what they're saying from the beginning. First, be open to them. Open your heart, open your mind, okay? And then as we go into it, we can go and do this back in what's called the believing game. You believe a little, you're skeptical a little, you believe until you reach the truth of what the reading is saying. That's what maybe all of us, without realizing, we're taught in our language arts classes. When we were taught to read, we were taught to be open and to examine their perspective and what are they going through. But when we do that in digital spaces, the problem is there's a lot of misinformation occurring online. And so a lot of us are entering digital spaces with a believing stance. And so we become more susceptible to believing misinformation. We fall too quickly into it. And instead, when we're reading in digital spaces, we need to start with a doubting stance or a skeptical stance. So when we're in print, we're more in a believing stance first. And when we're in digital, we're more in a skeptical stance. And it kind of goes, yeah, like this. So in order to cultivate this stance, the stances that we have within us, they're kind of our deep inner beliefs or our ideals or how we view the world, our perspectives. And in order for us to really, I feel like I want to back away for a little because I feel like because I'm not really seeing your faces, I want to make sure I haven't lost anyone. Is there anything right now? I feel like I'm talking so much. Is there anything right now that you guys have a question about first, about the dispositions and about believing and doubting? And I would love to hear your questions. I love questions. I love when people don't understand things. I want you to feel comfortable with not understanding something. Is everyone getting it?
Mhm.
Yeah? Really? It's all good? Okay. I
Yeah.
just feel like it's really? Okay, so it's straightforward. Okay, good. It's just when it's so quiet, I can't tell. So, like I said, these dispositions, they're things that you have to cultivate, okay? And this is where, when it comes to reading, where media literacy education really helps that. So we have these different things that we teach students about the digital information ecosystem. We teach them about synthetic media. We teach them about algorithmic bias, confirmation bias, negativity bias, the attention economy, misinformation, about how there's no vetting. It used to be there that there would be vetting. Now that we have digital spaces, yes, we've democratized information, which is great, but we've also democratized misinformation. Now there's all this information, and it's hard to navigate these things. So I want to ask you guys, have any of you guys um, taught any of these things in your courses to teach the doubting stance?
No, not really.
No. What are your thoughts about the difference between the doubting stance and the believing stance?
I'll just chime in. Surprisingly,
Yeah.
I had to deal with this a lot because I teach folklore and there's a lot of
Yeah.
fake lore on the internet. And I'm so
Mhm.
grateful for this term fake lore that sounds like folklore and
Yeah,
it's
I
fake.
like that.
Everybody knows like you got the two wolves inside you, not an Indian story. That is Billy Graham. And so I felt like it was a natural thing for me to teach, and it was really important for me to teach, and it was useful and interesting because it was like thematically natural. So it wasn't being tacked on to the class. It totally fit.
Yeah. So you were able to teach them about how there are these fake folklores out there. That was your way of showing this, creating this doubting disposition in the beginning.
Right, but not trying not to shame, right? It's like, oh, look what you
Without
found.
shaming.
You
Yes.
then find a folktale.
Yeah.
You found a piece of fake lore. It's really
Yeah.
widespread. Here's how we can see how
Yeah.
it's widespread. You want to find out where it came from. We can try to do that. So that theme of not shaming came up earlier, and I think that's really important about this
Yeah.
too. It's not like, oh, you're stupid if you don't have this doubting stance. It's like, what are we doing here, and why do we need to do things different?
I think that point is brilliant about the not shaming, because it could be so easy for us to, if someone finds something and maybe they didn't go through the process of verifying it or figure out, for us to kind of shame them in that. What do you feel that shaming would do to students? Why would that not be a good approach?
Oh, I mean, it's just the worst thing ever. Students are being shamed constantly, right? So I mean, they're being graded. We're done right there. They've gotten their maximum amount of
Yeah.
shame from being
Yeah.
graded. So yeah, no
Yeah.
shame.
Yeah. No shame.
Go
Does
ahead,
anyone else
Christina.
have anything? Yeah, go ahead.
I've been really thinking about this a lot, like the believing stands in print, and I'm like, why? Why would that be the case? Is it, because historically there's
Can you
frequent,
repeat that question one more time that you had just said the start of it? Be
sure,
Yeah, because I missed it. I'm sorry.
sure, no
Thinking about the
problem.
believing with print
Yeah, like
Yeah.
versus
why is that a thing? And I'm
Mhm.
wondering, is it because historically, like there's been a lot of, editorial and peer review and, so by the time it makes it to print, it's so costly to do, it's sort of more verified, whereas it's easy to print something online. Like, is that maybe it? And then I
Yeah.
started thinking about AI and AI books and how it's easy to print AI books. And so now print, like you can't always believe anymore. Anyway, those are just some thoughts that I've been thinking
They're
about.
very real thoughts. No, you're exactly right. And wondering where this came from. And a thought that I often have is, what would be the problem? I want to phrase it where it's like, I don't want to make it clear what my opinion is. Would it be problematic if we just had people always in a doubting stance? If we told them make that your default all the time, why would that be problematic, or is that problematic?
I don't know. Maybe I'm the wrong person. I teach
No,
philosophy. We
what do you
frequently are in a doubting stance in philosophy.
And I teach
The whole idea
cybersecurity. I'm the
is to
same, Christina.
question. Yeah. I don't know. I guess it would be hard to ever like learn things, I suppose, if you're
Yeah.
constantly questioning, right? If you never believe anything. I don't
Mhm.
know.
And it's
Yeah,
exhausting.
Maybe
it
it
could be
would,
exhausting. Go ahead, Heather. Yeah, what were you gonna say?
maybe it would make it more difficult students to feel empathy for
Yeah,
the people they're reading
yeah.
about.
Definitely, definitely. Like if we were reading, if we had our students reading about an oppressed group, for example, and they're always in doubting stance, this would be problematic, right? So we don't, being in either stance for too long is problematic. We do always have to be in this back and forth, and becoming that proficient reader, like we're saying, knowing in the brain which one to switch to, which questions to ask, and also internally, what am I switching between to ensure that I'm making smart decisions and I'm being critical, but I'm also being open and empathetic and listening to others' points of view, right? It's this switch that goes back and forth. And it is 1:30. Unfortunately, I should have made this workshop longer. I did have not one more thing, but I just wanted to just say this as like a quick wrap up was, and I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I'm not going to talk at all about it. I just want to say, I do actually want you to really leave with feeling also the importance that if we want our students to be readers, we ourselves also have to go back to reading. And we have to go back to immersing ourselves in reading and getting lost in a book. And a quick activity that we won't have time to do, but I had wanted you guys to think of a book that really changed you and moved you, and then to share it. So maybe as you're leaving, you can just in the chat, as you're saying bye, type in a book that really resonated. And that could, no shame, that could have been 15 years ago, the last time you did it. Share a book with one another. This was the book that recently changed me, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. And I really enjoyed my time with, sitting with such an intelligent group of teachers. You've given me a lot of insight. Thank you for being so kind and generous in your comments and in, participating in all these activities. And yeah, thank you. And please, I'll stick around here if you have any other questions, or if you want to contact me at all, you can find me on LinkedIn anytime. You can message me and I'll always respond. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. And we left links in the chat somewhere about the survey if you can help and you can find some time.
Yes, please
We
fill in the
always look
survey.
forward to that.
Mhm.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone.
This
And
was
if you want
wonderful.
to close the recording, Ken, you
Yeah,
can.
I'm going to do that right now.